Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Today, we are going to present you the recent updates from Ukraine, from the battlefield and from the agricultural fields of Ukraine. And as this session is going to be pre-recorded, as all our other sessions, everyone who didn't have a chance to join live will be able to look through both the presentation and the video recording on YouTube. Our link for the presentation will be both on our website, which is www.wrru.org/live, or at YouTube under the in the first comments. So today is September 23rd, and we are going to start first of all with the reason why we set up our World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine project and how it functions, and then we'll go to the recent updates. Once again, I am inviting everyone to join the efforts in spreading the word about our information about our biweekly sessions, because in this war of the modern style war, it is critically important to provide the accurate and information from the source, from the original source, which we are doing directly from the battlefields and from agricultural fields. So, World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine, this is our, I'm sorry, just 1 second. And yeah. Trying to go. I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. This is the initiative that we have started in April, and it is meant to help the small family farms and small farmers in Ukraine survive through the war and be able to keep doing their important business, growing food for themselves, for their families, for their communities, and for the market. So when we first, at the beginning of the war, when we first started communicating with our Ukrainian farmers, asking how they are doing, we understood that there is a stratum of society which is the least protected and least supported. Those are the actual village citizens who do not have any alternative in terms of place to stay, place to do business, and any possibility to get any funds for rebuilding. And every 10th of them have been severely damaged in the northern areas of Ukraine. But this time, today, we already know that even more the rate of those who suffered in the northeastern part in Kharkiv Oblast, which was just recently liberated and freed from Russian occupation, the truth was revealed, and we will talk about that today. So there is much more work to be done in those areas. Our aim within each of those aid recipients that we decide to be helping to is to first of all fix or rebuild their houses so that they have their roof over their head. Secondly, help them rebuild or fix their production capacities to be able to do farming and repurchase the agricultural machinery and farm animals, because it is all worth of money and they cannot afford it right now. In order to be most transparent and in order to be corruption-free, we have invited respected people throughout the world to be our guides in decision making on how the money is spent. And you can see on our webpage ambassadors, you will see the people throughout the world: Great Britain, Canada, United States, Ukraine, and more are welcome to join. So everyone who can help us in this initiative and promote us, and is willing to do so until the last rebuilt household in Ukraine is welcome to join this board of ambassadors. We have two important principles. First of all, we never give off cash. In return, we give off the services in rebuilding or reconstruction, fixing of the facilities, and no upgrade. If the farmer was using the tractor 120 horsepower, he gets the same one instead, because he just knows best how to utilize 120 horsepower. Very important message for everyone to know how to help. First of all, you can donate to the American NGO LifeNets. This is according to the Charity Navigator, this is the third-party estimation system of the NGOs. They have 100 scores out of the 100. They are our partners. They are accumulating the money for our use, and once the Board of Ambassadors approves spending of certain amount of money, this LifeNets organization transfers it to our Ukrainian accounts, and the process goes on. The second thing, we always try to give back something to the people for their good things. And in return for at least 200 donations, we propose everyone to either get a free access to all our online school, the School of Agriculture, of production of 5 crops, which is, if you follow this QR code, you can reach it, or travel with us. And right now we are recruiting participants for the travel to New Zealand. Again, you get the discount for this trip in the amount that you have donated to World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine efforts. Of course, we are looking for the outreach, and one of our main goals is to raise awareness about what is really going on in the villages and what is the situation that Ukrainian farmers are facing. That's why we are looking for any possibility to speak public, to do the interviews, to present to businesses and to those who can make the difference. It's either the business or it is the officials, government officials, or foundations. Anything is good, and I'm open for any suggestions. I will prioritize the visits with those entities in my schedule. This is our team only in Ukraine who are working on making this program be most effective and quickly responding to the needs of the small family farms in Ukraine. Now, the actual topic of our today's, let's go to the agenda of our today's topic. So over the last 2 weeks, and it started a little bit more about 16 days ago, Ukrainian armed forces tricked Russian forces by saying that they will prioritize counter offensive operation in the south. They went in the northeast. So Russians were not expecting the attack from that side, and Ukrainian warriors succeeded pushing them back almost, as you can see, from the Kharkiv Oblast almost to the Luhansk Oblast. And the yellow, it is the amount of land that we freed up. It is 8,500 square kilometers. For you to compare it with the total acreage of Ukrainian territory, this is 600,000 square kilometers. So 8,500 was freed. This is approximately 150,000 people who, as you probably have seen on the news, were welcoming Ukrainian soldiers with tears of happiness, of course. This is the total area that is still occupied. You can see it in red, and this territory makes up about 20%, 1/5 of Ukrainian territory still. It is huge, unfortunately, but we are going towards recapturing it. And the front line, which is making most difficult for our soldiers to be effective, is equaling 1,300 kilometers. That is huge distance. This is a little bit more details about how actually we are moving on the south. Just like the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said, we are prioritizing the south counteroffensive, and this is how it is moving. There are a lot of soldiers, Russian troops, stuck in this area in Kherson. All the bridges are destroyed. They regularly use barges to supply food for them, and even they cannot afford taking all their stuff back. They wouldn't be able to escape so quickly like it was in Kharkiv in the northeast. By the way, there were photographs when all their belongings, the Russian soldiers' belongings, were left just as it is. And at one of the photos, there was this pot with water boiling pasta on the stove, and it was all left just like this. They simply took off and started running. As a result, in the southeast counteroffensive, we have freed up two important, actually a lot of important villages and towns, but two of them are important from the military standpoint because Russians were using them as the storage for their weapons and for their machinery, military machinery. So they ended up giving it all to us, and there is a joke right now among Ukrainian soldiers that so far the best lend-lease is given to Ukraine by Russia. Unfortunately, there are bad news, and this is another Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, Borodyanka scenarios that we all have been hearing in April this year when Russians left the northern part of Ukraine. They were simply destroying, killing, and as they name it, I can't even repeat this word because they made it up. So they were destroying the nation of Ukraine. For me, there is no doubt that this is all about genocide of Ukrainians, because first of all, and this is already proven by the intelligences from the West, they came to Ukraine, they were preparing to come to Ukraine, having the lists of the patriots in each of the towns to be visiting them first. Secondly, they were moving into Ukrainian territory with crematoriums, mobile crematoriums. Thirdly, they purchased 40,000 body bags, like the corpse bags. I'm sure they were not preparing them for their own soldiers, rather for these people. And in Bucha, Irpin, as well as in here, in these towns, the first ones killed, murdered ruthlessly and tortured, because a lot of bodies were found with their hands tied at the back and no nails. And the things that terrible that were revealed there. These people were visited by Russian soldiers first, and no mercy was applied to them, unfortunately. And still, these teams of people digging out the corpse and trying to identify the bodies, they're still working in those areas. The actual state of the buildings is about 70% of buildings are severely damaged in all those cities. In Balaklia, this is another big town in the area, Ukrainians have found two chambers in the downtown where Russians were making tortures to the people, and torture rooms, 10 separate torture rooms in total were found in those areas. Today, the pseudo referendums or illegal referendums, so-called referendums, have started in the 4 territories of Ukraine. Here you can see it being cut into 3 pieces, but in fact it is Donetsk Oblast number 1. They call it DNR, Luhansk Oblast, LNR 2, Zaporizhia 3, and Kherson 4. So they are walking with the machine guns through the streets and inviting with fake smiles people to vote. If they see that people are not wanting to vote or not supporting Russia, they force them with machine guns. This is the recent news that I've heard from the social media today. On the 21st of September, and it brought a lot of hustle into the news media worldwide. I'm sorry. The news showed us that Putin announced the mobilization. Mobilization was said to be only 300,000 people, but in fact, there is a point there which says that it might be up to 1 million. Right now, the limit is 1 million, and this point in this report is hidden. And these people that are the first to be invited to the army started escaping from the scenarios like their comrades in earlier, and all their flights, all the routes outside from Russia are packed and in traffic jam. So as a result, now they have closed the borders so that men between 16 and 65 cannot leave the country. This is not for good for Putin's reputation. It does nothing good for Putin's reputation. Now about their losses, and this is the reason why they are so much in trouble right now and trying to find new soldiers. According to you can see here two sources of information. Russians, there are 55,000 of Russians killed, but according to a different report this is the Ukrainian, by the way, source on the left. On the right is the Ukrainian article about Russian source that there were a couple of days ago over 80,000 Russians killed. And this is the report that was laid on the table of Putin. He was, of course, extremely unhappy with that. And Shoigu, his Ministry of Defense, had been showing the smaller numbers before, 10 times smaller, like 6,000 or 8,000 people, Russian soldiers dead. But in fact, it is 10,000 more. So he is not getting the true information, as we can see. Now let's shift slowly to our Ukrainian agricultural sector and the losses to it. There have been a lot of calculations, but it is very hard to provide the accurate numbers right now before we deoccupied our territories. And as I've mentioned, 20% of our land is under occupation. This 20% includes 10% of the sunflower processing capacity. This is for the total of Ukrainian area, which is 28 million hectares of arable land. You can take off 20% because all of those territories are agricultural territories. There are no mountains like in Carpathia. So even maybe more than 20% of arable lands are under occupation, not to speak about the businesses. So direct losses are considered to be $4 billion. This is just the equipment, the warehouses, the enterprises, the machinery, and so on and so on. 22 billion is the losses, including the income. And for you to understand, in Ukraine, 18% of population, which is 43 million people, 43 to 45, according to different estimations, 18% are directly involved in agriculture. And 20 more are also supplying all of working for the agricultural industry to supply it with everything necessary. As a result, we have 38%, almost 40% of people working in agriculture. And that equals the 40% of the income that Ukraine is receiving by the agricultural sector within all the export. So we have a lot of irons and ores being exported, but they make up only 60%. 40% is agriculture. And this is not only the crops, also a lot of processed products. We will talk about it a little later today. So every 6 storage facility, which are very much important and very much needed to Ukrainian farmers right now, when there is no price and there is no possibility to sell the commodities quickly in the volumes that they need, they are looking for any square meter to store their crops that they are harvesting right now. And every 6 of grain storage has been destroyed. According to United Nations organization, it differs a little bit from our domestical numbers. I've mentioned that in the previous biweeklies, but we have about 75 million tons of capacity to store the commodities. According to organization of United Nations, it is 14% that have been damaged severely. According to this data on the previous slide, it is 12.5. Very close, but like I said, no one knows what is the status or how is the situation with what is the situation with the elevators and grain storage facilities in the south of Ukraine, which is still at most occupied, unfortunately. Just recent, September 18. Why? Nobody knows, but now we start guessing that this is another goal for Russians. It's to fight with Ukrainian agricultural production facilities and farms. They have shelled and totally destroyed the farm in Wolfene village in Sumy Oblast, where 100 pigs and horse died. 2 grain storages and water tower and mill were torn down. And of course, vehicles and agricultural machinery were also destroyed, unfortunately. And with these prices for the commodities, it will take a long for this farmer to rebuild. Here is the structure of Ukrainian, the geography of Ukrainian export. If you remember, about a week or maybe 10 days ago, Putin said that this grain corridor that Ukrainians asked to open, it is, instead of feeding the developing countries, the African countries, and by the way, at that moment he was talking to the leaders of African countries, instead of coming to your countries, it is coming all to Europe. But in fact, as you can see, yes, Spain is buying most of it. The second is Turkey. And the reason is because Turkey gets the huge discount on these commodities that they buy from us. Therefore, they get more in volume. Then comes Egypt, 311, Italy, almost 300, China, Romania, Netherlands, Iran. By the way, Iran is buying our commodities and they are selling the military equipment to Russia to fight Ukraine. This is the reality. So totally, there were almost 3.5 million tons of egg produce exported. I cannot see the through this grain initiative, but I have the next slide. It will just a second. I'm sorry, I cannot go back for some reason. Yeah, 169 ships left Ukrainian ports within this grain initiative as of September 19. So starting from August 1st to September 19, this is the amount of ships that left the Ukrainian ports. However, why haven't we seen a huge raise of the prices for the commodities? And we will be talking about it today more. But first of all, there were a lot of commodities stuck in the terminals of the Black Sea that belonged to Ukrainian huge corporations and agricultural holdings. Like, for example, Kernel, the first ever ship in this that used this corridor was the corn, was filled with corn and was taken through this corridor from Kernel, the corporation. Also, these commodities, they are, as you have seen, purchased by the countries at the discount. Therefore, there is no possibility to approach the global prices very much because of the discount. Thirdly, insurance for transportation of those commodities through this corridor is way high, and usually at the beginning, at least, huge ships like Panamaxes and so on were reluctant to use this corridor, and instead of loading about 100,000 tons per one ship, 70 to 100, they were loading 10, 15, 20 per one ship. So the volumes are minimum. And for you to remember, before the grain initiative, before the war, we were able to export through our 7 ports about 5 million metric tons of commodities. And that infrastructure had been developed during the Soviet Union for the reverse purpose, to import the commodities. They were importing all agricultural commodities from other countries. But once Ukraine has become independent, has developed our agricultural industry and set up it to work by the rules of the business, the marketing, this infrastructure was just reversed for the export. And it has been working perfectly for Ukraine, not causing any drops of the prices in Europe for European farmers, just like it is happening right now, because a lot of Ukrainian commodities started to move through the border on the ground and now are causing troubles to the countries for example, Bulgaria or even Poland. Poland at some point here this summer refused to store Ukrainian commodities for sales because it would drop their price for their farmers heavily. So our sea transportation export was very important to supply at the market prices Ukrainian commodities to the countries that need it very much. But now we are just redeveloping or reinvesting, so to say, our capacities to transport these commodities through this corridor. And the very important thing is that this corridor is going to last. The first agreement was made till the 22nd of November this year. Yesterday I reached out the person who is involved in this corridor. I know him personally, and so far it is not clear. According to what he said, so far it is not clear because this is a very political decision. And of course, everything influences. Both the military news are influencing, and of course, political and economical are influencing this situation. Therefore, no one can make any predictions behind this date. And as I will be speaking later about sunflower, each of the businesses, they are developing 2 scenarios: optimistic and pessimistic. Optimistic if it continues to work, pessimistic if it is closed again. Okay, now I would like to invite, we have here a guest, Mr. Paul Dubrovets. Are you here? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Roman.
Very good. Thank you for finding time. Mr. Paul is an expert in trades, and he is the consultant in merchandising of agricultural commodities for the company named Advanced Trading, which is located in the United States, Illinois. But Mr. Dubrovets, please go ahead and introduce yourself better, because you know what to stress here.
Sure. No, I appreciate the ask, Roman. And so my name's Paul Dubrovic, or as Roman more correctly pronounced it, Dubrovets. Believe it or not, my father immigrated here to the United States in 1957, escaping the communism through a lengthy period of time. I'm not going to bore anybody with, but very proud Slovak, but very proud American as well. And anyway, advanced trading's in the risk management and hedging business. We do business across the U.S. as well as about 7 or 8 different countries globally. So appreciate it. But Roman asked me to kind of give a quick 10 or 15-minute rundown of some of the major commodities throughout the globe, and how particularly the situation in Ukraine may have impact. This first chart, all credit to our group of analysts here at Advanced Trading and helping me put these together. But first chart here, you can see on the nearby corn, basically the 2022 in the red. Those are the pricings of the nearby futures month.
I'm sorry. I just hit it mistakenly. Just a second.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. There is some problem here with the. Let me reshare the screen once again. It wouldn't listen to me. Terribly sorry.
Well, while you're trying to fix that, Roman, I'll just kind of continue on. But
yeah,
no doubt when the initial invasion of Ukraine by the Russians in February occurred, we had extreme volatile activity. In fact, I can remember specifically not getting very much sleep for about a 36-hour period of time because of the extreme volatility in the marketplace. And when you're dealing with, international clients at all hours of the night, they tend to get a little bit more erratic at times, and you're there to basically help them weed through it. But since that time, we are continuing as a global trade, to continue to monitor this export corridor situation. It did feel as though, even though it was in fairly light total quantities, we were able to see a little bit of corn, a little bit of wheat, some other products leak out through the from Ukraine indirectly through Romania and some other areas. So smaller vessels were able to get loaded indirectly through rail and then loaded up in some of these smaller ports in some of the Black Sea region for export, but very minimal. Obviously, the export corridor has picked things up. But one of the things that you'll note, again, the far right chart gives you the nearby corn futures in terms of volatility. And you can see in the gray, the average volatility versus 2022 in the red. Shortly after the war had started, you can see where the red line peaked over above the average volatility for that time of the year. So there's some seasonality to it, but obviously we bolstered activity in the marketplace well beyond what would be considered normal. So one of the things that we've seen here now is, in addition to the just watching the ability or the availability, I should say, of corn and even soy out of the Ukraine, but also wheat become a big part of this. We've also seen some of the outside influence of what Putin has done in the global economies in terms of providing further instability and concerns. And that has definitely caused some issues with regards to global values, whether it be in the macro economic financial space or on the commodities sector side. So one of the things that is kind of being probably has a greater influence today over commodity prices from a just corn, bean, and wheat standpoint has been on the corn and bean side. We are starting pretty strong harvest here in the United States. We've definitely seen a slow decline in yield estimates coming mainly in corn because of the drier, warmer weather that we saw, especially in portions of the western United States. But we've also seen a start to harvest, and a pickup in that should be in pretty heavy harvest here in the States here by next week in some of the major growing states. So you got more seasonal demand, or not seasonal demand, but seasonal price pressure on markets right now on the corn and bean side, as well as what we've seen here in the last 2 days with not only US Fed, but a lot of the other foreign nations raising interest rates. And as the interest rates have risen, we've seen the dollar charge higher to 20-year highs in some cases in the last couple of days. And obviously, if you inflate the US dollar against foreign currencies, it just raises or elevates the price around the globe. So US commodities become less competitive. The problem is we don't have a very secure, stable supply really coming out of the Ukraine right now. I've seen several concerns brewing here, especially with the announcement here over the last couple of days and everything that's going on in terms of some ship operators, some shipping companies that are becoming more leery of sending vessels in for loading, even with the corridor still being open. For safety fears of the vessels, and obviously the people on those vessels as well. So Roman, if you flip to the next slide here, just to kind of continue on the price volatility side of the equation, the wheat situation, obviously you can see again in the gray on the far right, that would be a normal volatility range for the course of 1 year. And then you can see where 2022, virtually as soon as the war started, you saw an extreme uptick in price volatility. And things have kind of come off since then as well. I think part of the reason is we've seen global production numbers increase a little bit, specifically in Russia. And I think Roman, you had said a few meetings ago, I kind of chuckled at the comment that Russia had raised their export projections by 40%, or I forget what your specific one-liner was on that. But
back then it was 50%. But yesterday I have heard that now they're talking about 50 million of wheat, a million of tons of wheat. Now they're talking about 90. I don't know where they're taking these numbers, but definitely it's not what they grow by themselves.
Right. So it's definitely, food for thought or questions certainly to be asked here. But at least at the moment, U.S. Wheat has priced itself pretty much out of the market on the global side of the equation. We need to see a little bit more of that happen. But from a global wheat standpoint, obviously there's some demand out there. Continues to be some growing concerns by underdeveloped nations access to wheat. Some of this has been alleviated with the export corridor here. So, but I would say right now, from an overall standpoint, the market is definitely monitoring the situation on a daily, weekly basis as far as what's going on, how many exports, the uptick that we've seen in availability. But again, for the moment, I think the ongoing activity and growth in harvest activity in the United States is probably having a little bit greater effect on pricing right now. And the other major, piece to this is just the global macro financials and the uncertainty with growing inflation, extreme higher interest rates, and the growing value in the U.S. dollar becoming a problem as well. So next slide, if you can here, Roman. Again, not as big of a scenario here as you can see in the soybean market. as terms of seasonal volatility when the war started as well. The soybean market has been a little bit tamed by fairly good production in South America, and we've seen pretty heavy pricings or weighted values pressure on the market here in the last few weeks due to primarily the Argentine producer getting enticed by the government's program right now, which is elevating the value of the peso if you sell soybeans over there versus the actual going rate. So we've seen a glut of sales on the market, and that's actually put a pretty heavy pressure on things. The other thing on the soy complex, and it really does have an indirect effect on the sunflower market as well, because sunflower oil is a global veg oil, has been the price activity in palm oil, which is, as many of you know, the cheapest edible veg oil on the globe, and very popular amongst a lot of countries. Malaysia's seasonal uptick in production is beginning. Indonesia's become very actively engaged and very aggressive in making greater global sales activity here in the last couple weeks, and looks like a combination of growing stocks and a little bit more aggression is pushing things, a little bit more towards weaker pricing as well. So again, we are in harvest here as well. So there's a number of different things, but from a total protein and or global veg oil market, again, affecting the sunflower market in Ukraine, we've definitely seen the palm have a big piece of this in terms of just overall pressure on the markets. Next slide here, Roman. So one of the things that we're looking at as well on a daily basis is just, and Roman's touched on this a number of times. If you look on this chart alone, you can see where in the red, that was 2021, 2022 exports. So that would have been the tail end of last year into this year. And the red line basically on the far right basically depicts where you saw the exports of corn out of the Ukraine beginning really last May into June. We saw a fairly decent uptick, but realistically below the last 5 years. And again, it looks like on the far left, if you look at the 2022 numbers here, the 4-week average right now has been higher. And again, I think biggest contribution to that has been the availability of supply and the export corridor as well. But still not near as much as we would like to see available out of there. And the market is definitely focused on wondering how much longer this export corridor is going to go on, because we are tightening the belts here globally on just coarse grain as well as corn availability globally. I mean, here in the United States right now, the USDA is actually projecting a stocks to use ratio here of 8.5% with slightly over 1.2 billion bushels in carry out. Our internal numbers have those numbers shrunk down even more to about 1.1 billion bushels and a sub 8% stocks to use number, which is the tightest I've seen, one of the tightest I've seen in my 30-year career in this business. So it's pretty crucial really that we have flow of Ukraine corn to help feed a lot of the global market. Next slide here, Roman. And then the same thing is going on the wheat side of the equation. Again, you can see the red line on the lower right, the tail end of 2021 in terms of May and June going forward. Again, the left side, the light blue line there, signifying where we're at in terms of the 4-week average on Ukraine wheat exports. Certainly on the lower side of the equation versus the last few years. And wheat is definitely a significant part of the export program out of the Ukraine that we're watching at. So, despite an export corridor helping kind of relieve things a little bit, still, no surprise here to anybody on this call, still well below what we would like to see and well below the last 5 years type of numbers, and would assume, cautiously optimistic that we keep this grain corridor going, but we'll wait and see. And quite frankly, some of the comments that you had made earlier, Roman, regarding the every 6 storage facility being destroyed is concerning, because obviously there would be for some here in the United States, and for others, I'm sure they've stored some commodities like corn pretty easily in forms of ground piles. If you can do it in a decent way and are able to properly store it, but under the circumstances, I would assume that would be extremely difficult, in terms of what you're dealing with right now, which only magnifies the importance of getting the new harvested crop, not only in storage but in transit, so that we don't have additional loss in terms of just sheer commodities. So that's
very
kind of,
rightly said.
yeah.
And like I mentioned in the agenda, I've heard, this is not proven, but this is the information coming directly from the farmers in Kherson. They used corn to dry or to keep the corn from the previous year dry. So once Kherson Oblast was occupied, the supply of gas was limited, as well as limited possibility to pay for it. So some farmers used corn to burn it and to dry the remaining corn. So that is something that you do not hear every day. And I've heard a lot of farmers telling that corn will be the last for them to decide to harvest this year. And most likely they will leave it in the fields for the sake of putting into the storage the oil commodities first. So that is just the rumors coming from the farmers. We'll see how it is, because so far all the projections about production, at least the production of commodities on Ukrainian side, were wrong. Because, and I will talk about it a little later, this is one of the top 5 years in the total volume of produced Ukrainian crops within the 30 years period, disregarding the difficulties due to the war. Thank you very much, dear Paul, and thank you for joining. Here I'm slowly going to a different chart. Please stay with us. Maybe you will get some useful information, or correct me if I'm missing something, because from time to time I'm getting lost in the terminologies, DAP or FOB and so on. Thank you. So right now we have started the topic of the export of and trading of Ukrainian commodities, agricultural commodities. And as you know, throughout the war, the main source or the main way to export the commodities was the cargo transportation through the railroads. I've got this information from the railroad company, and as you can see, they are doing their best to increase the numbers of exports. There were a lot of complaints about their prices being way too high, the cars staying way too long at the borders, so that at times corn is even spoiled and gets the penalty for lower quality standard. However, it is working, and they are moving through these difficulties with reloading at the border, with increasing the volume per day that they transport. And that is done in addition to supplying our army and transporting the people, because there is no air connections. This, in order to spare some time, I will just leave these slides for your attention after the session. Right now, we will slowly be moving towards the topic of sunflower. Sunflower is, as you know, the main crop for Ukraine and for Ukrainian farmers, and it has been so since the year 2000, because So that is the year when we actually quit importing sunflower oil, but started to look into the side of producing our own sunflower oil. As you can see, Ukraine has been before the war the top producer of sunflower. Russia is the second one. We have about 70 sunflower oil processing crushing plants, which can produce 60,000 metric tons per day. And according to the recent information that we got from APK Inform, like I mentioned, there are two scenarios, optimistic and pessimistic. Optimistic, this is if the port, the grain corridor is open, and it is very important for the processed products like oil and sunflower meal to be exported. There, in that case, the sales of the actual raw material, which is sunflower seed, will go down. Instead, the sales of the actual oil will go up. But in the pessimistic scenario, it will be vice versa. You can see here that our the acreage, the planted area is very low, and this is the percent of the acres within all the oil seeds planted in this year, which is also canola and soybeans. So we have the lowest planting area for sunflower in this year for over 10 years. You can see 2012, it was pretty similar. And however, we still pertain among top sunflower producing countries. And the lowest yield within the last 7 years of sunflower. However, we have a lot of sunflower in our stock, and the lack, so to say, of the freshly produced sunflower this year is covered with the remaining in the storage facilities. So about the export, here you can see that starting from March, we were growing until in export of sunflower, the actual sunflower seeds, not the oil and meal, which used to be the main export product. So the seeds export were growing till June, and then it went down. In the end of July, the corridor was open, and the sea exportation was available. Turkey, again, at this discount, is very much interested in our sunflower seeds. Also, we can see this is the countries that were purchasing sunflower seeds throughout this season and throughout the previous season. So first is EU, European countries. They started to increase the capacities of their crushing facilities and were purchasing Ukrainian sunflower instead. Turkey is the second, then is Moldova. Moldova has a lot of crushing facilities. That's why they're interested in the raw material. Previous year, yes, the EU was number one country purchasing the seeds, sunflower seeds, then Moldova. There was no Turkey on the list. Now we are talking about the processing, the actual processing of Ukrainian sunflower. And as you can see, 10% of our processing facilities are in the occupied territories, and no one knows what's actually the status of them. So out of 70, at least 63 are, or maximum 63 are running. And you can see how since the February, the processing dynamics has dropped and was gradually growing till the time of the export of the corridor was the grain corridor was opened. Regarding the prices, so there is a high pressure from the sunflower stock in Ukraine. It means that the price of the sunflower is very much influenced by the stocks that are still here and inability to export as much as it is needed. So again, the price in Ukraine is not adequate in compared to the world prices. Now the sunflower oil. Again, optimistic scenario. If the corridor is open, they're going to be selling. We are going to be selling, producing, and then exporting 5.1 to 4.7 million tons. But in pessimistic scenario, when we cannot export the material, the product, we will be exporting sunflower seeds instead, and the processing will be less. You can see a 3.5, 3.1. Of course, the export of oil is mainly done by the sea. However, it was just 2 weeks ago that we saw on the news our Ministry of Agricultural Affairs, Mykola Solsky, was signing the memorandum with his with our partners in Poland, his peers in Poland, about building, and here is the most interesting, a pipeline coming from Volyn Oblast, northwest of Ukraine, to Poland. And this pipeline is to be pumping oil, sunflower oil, into EU. That is a much faster way to get it through the borders without any reloading and any hold-ons at the customs. But can you imagine, for example, Russia is selling the natural resources like gas and crude oil, but Ukraine is going to be selling the processed products from agricultural produced products. So we grow commodities, we process them, and we sell them. We pipe so much that we need a pipe to do that on a constant basis. This is, to me, it is very inspiring, and this is something new. I'm proud of if it is going to happen of our country. Sunflower meal has this is a byproduct of sunflower oil production, and before that it was quite an expensive protein, and the cheapest source of protein, but still quite expensive product to sell as the byproduct. This time, unfortunately, the prices are going down, and you can see that for example, in 2021, right now, the main buyers for sunflower, this is oil, and that's meal. Yeah, again, this is repeated. It was in the previous chart. So how it dropped in March and was slowly growing until July, and it's holding at this level. Oops, sunflower. That's. Oh, I'm sorry. Again, the problem with the slides. Just a second. I'll go back here to this slide. Okay. That's processing. Yeah. So sunflower meal. Importing geography of sunflower meal. You can see Ukraine, Russia, and Argentina. Now, Russia, Argentina, Ukraine. That is what I'm talking about. It changed because of inability to export. Our grain corridor is limited, and the priority crops are being sent. So the price for the meal, it's almost in Ukraine, it's almost it's becoming almost free, and the loss of Chinese market. So China is not purchasing that much of commodities as it used to be before. So therefore, the price went down. So this is the chart that shows how the transportation of sunflower oil has changed. It used to be 96% by sea. Now it is only 42% by sea and 58% by land. Let's proceed to Kharkiv Oblast. Since the previous session, 2 weeks ago, we have set up a tradition to speak about our regions, why they are important from the agricultural and from the economical standpoint of view. And we are starting from the regions which are called in Ukrainian Oblast, from the ones that are under occupation. Of course, over these last 2 weeks, Kharkiv Oblast, the northeast of Ukraine, has been on the news, on the world news, and I decided to devote a couple of slides to this region and tell you why it is important. So out of 42 million people, or 43, almost 3 of them live in this oblast. Kharkiv, the capital of this oblast, used to be a capital of Ukraine some time in the history ago. Its total area is 31,000 square kilometers. So you know that 600,000, this is the total acreage of Ukraine. So 5% of Ukraine is taken by this oblast. Farmland, 2.4 million hectares out of 28 total, is again 10%, around 10%. The main crops that are grown there, this is more of the northern area, which has a little bit better precipitation but shorter season, and as a result, the crops are that can be grown there are corn, sunflower, wheat, fodder grass, sugar beet, barley, and others. But corn is okay to be grown there, unlike the very southern oblast in Ukraine. Horticulture is represented by cherries, pears, plums, apples. I have a lot of farmers I know myself who are into horticulture there. On February 24th, the occupation has started, and Kharkiv Oblast was one of the regions that was attacked at first. However, the Kharkiv city was remaining all the time, was remaining free from the occupation until the troops, Russian troops, retreated, so to say, they made goodwill. Part of this oblast, unfortunately, has been occupied and freed only recently, and we are still fighting for the remaining towns and cities, territories of this oblast to liberate them. Izum, Kupiansk, Balaklia are the biggest cities that have been freed up from Russian occupation recently, starting from September, actually September 11th. In return for our successful counteroffensive, Russia started to shell our important for the life of civil people, and that's considered to be very wrong, illegal according to Geneva Convention, because it is targeting not the military but the civilians. So they have been shelling the power plants to in the face of winter, to limit the access of civilians to the energy sources. This is the map that is showing how we have been moving through this territory during the liberation period over these 2 weeks. This oblast, as I've mentioned, was first to be attacked for the reason that it borders to Russian Oblast, Belgorodska Oblast, which is Belgorod city is the capital of it, and therefore they can reach it with artillery, and they use artillery against this territory every day, especially to the close to the border towns and cities, and the devastation is huge there because they do not economize on the bullets and on the ammunition. As of the agricultural side of things, it is it can boast with the very fertile Chernozem black soils, and both moisture and this black soils, they make it very agricultural. Heat is, although it is the more to the north, it is still sufficient enough of sunlight for crops like corn or soybeans. Here is some breakdown on the crops and on the areas, acreages that are used for these crops. You can see that the most significant are sunflower. There is a lot of sunflower grown in this area, and I would say the conditions of growing sunflower in Kharkiv Oblast is similar with North Dakota in the United States of America. Of course, we have huge animal agricultural production there, and you can see that there is even sheep and beekeeping in that area. Where we have the supply of raw material, the production of crops, there usually is focused, the factories processing those crops. Here are the famous Ukrainian brands of food that are coming from Kharkiv Oblast. And by the way, to mention Ukrainian leader in liquid fertilizers production, Quantum, they are our partners, and they are supporters of World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine. Their factory is also located in Kharkiv Oblast next to the city, but on the other side from the Russia. So now let's move to harvesting season. This is very important from the side of understanding how much of commodities we will have by the end of this season to sell and to use. First of all, as I mentioned, this is one of the top 5 years in the total volume of production of egg crops over the last 30 years. It is by most crops, it is from 1.5 to 3 times more than maximum what we need domestically. Wheat we produce, and it is 99% harvested already, 19 million metric tons, but we need only 8 at most. Buckwheat, this is the commodity that we use on a weekly basis for sure, every family in Ukraine, and it is considered to be healthy and traditional for Ukraine. So at the beginning of the war, our politicians were saying that we need to make sure to secure the food supply for Ukrainians and for Ukrainian army. Therefore, we are asking you farmers to focus on the crops that we need first of all. As a result, farmers planted 150,000, harvested 150,000 metric tons of buckwheat, whereas we need only 110 for Ukrainian local consumption. Sugar, in the situation, in the sugar industry, the situation is a little bit better. This year, from the standpoint of the supply, we do not have this overproduction of sugar as it was years before, but unfortunately, the gas prices, and we still have the supply of gas, but with a much higher, much higher price, the processing of sugar is becoming a problem. So it's going to be expensive. So a minimum of, if we're speaking about the grains and oil seeds, minimum of 45 million metric tons of this year's harvest, not to mention the storages, what was in the storage before. So 45 million metric tons from this harvest is going to go to export. The question is whether the routes will be available. So here's what we have harvested this last almost 2 months of harvest. 99% of wheat and 100% of barley has been harvested. You can see the numbers. By the way, for you to, for our American friends to understand, each metric ton equals about 38 bushels, plus or minus, depending on the commodity. Sunflowers and soybean harvest just recently started. You can see sunflowers have been harvested only 14% from the volume, and soybeans just 6%. Canola is fully harvested, and we accumulated 3.1 million metric tons of canola. These are the three oil crops: sunflower, soybeans, and canola. And sugar beet, just like I mentioned, the harvest has just started. According to Denis Marchuk prognosis about months or so ago, the farmers will be reluctant to plant winter crops for the next season. So this fall, they will be reluctant to plant, and about 30% of enterprises will cease planting period. And that is the topic that is raising most of the wariness or pessimistic prognoses. The reason is that previous year for Ukraine, previous season, has been very successful, and farmers succeeded selling a lot of their commodities before winter. Thus, they got some funds for the planting period. Also, they succeeded, everyone planted winter crops before the war. And when the war broke up, the commodities were already in the fields. All they needed to do is to treat them a couple of times and then harvest. However, the situation right now is that, I'm hearing it from the officials, but I'm also hearing it from the farmers who I could communicate with. The situation is that they cannot sell for the price that is above break-even point for the production. However, they need to pay back the loans to the banks. So they actually are forced to sell some. And now with the high prices for fuel, for inputs, for the fertilizers, and no vivid picture of what is going on, what is going to happen next year, they are really questioning whether to plant or not. The planting is going on. There is a prognosis, but we will know how much of it was fulfilled compared to the previous years. And for you to understand, at least 8 million hectares are usually planted under the winter crops out of 28, so about a third. Area of winter crops is forecasted right now, that's the latest as of September, 35% less than last seasons. So it's going to be only 4.7 million metric tons. Shifting of the crops is going to go towards the oil crop, the canola, rapeseed, from the winter wheat. This is the winter crops planting chart comparison year, COVID year 2021, 21-22, and this is what is right now planted for this planting season and the prognosis. As you can see, wheat, of course, is number one. It is still going to be the biggest, but what is going to be the share or correlation between winter wheat and canola, we will see, and it will depend upon, first of all, the developments on the battlefields. Secondly, economical factors, the possibility to get the loans, which is very much influenced by the possibility to sell at the reasonable price. And speaking about the price, so here I'm using this chart every time, and you can see what is the difference in the prices. First of all, worldwide, this is the third column. In red, this is the current price in the middle of Ukraine, and I'm taking the numbers from Dnipropetrovsk and Kirovohrad Oblast. So this is the forks of prices in those regions that farmers can sell for. And that is the first price in the middle row in black. This is the price at the beginning of the grain corridor functioning. So you can see that prices are growing, but very slowly. One of the reasons why it is growing slowly is huge reduction in the value of Ukrainian currency, hryvnia, because, for example, in July 29th, the value of hryvnia was about 39 to 41 hryvnias per $1. Right now, it is 43, 42. So it's becoming cheaper hryvnia, and the prices are, of course, stated in hryvnias in Ukraine. Now, to this price, we need to add, actually, this goes like the price at the port minus the logistical value. And you see, the further from the main ports is the farmer, the more they pay for logistics and the longer it is traveling. For example, Zhytomyr and Kyiv Oblast, this is that region, 20 to 25 days. It is, of course, a little bit, that's month-old chart, but still the price is pretty, the time frame and value of the logistics is pretty similar. And Chernihiv Oblast over here, here is Chernihiv, then Poltava, Kharkiv, up to 1 month of travel time. These are the prices at the main, so Constanța port, Brăila, Romania, for the commodities, and euro and dollar is pretty equal right now. The only thing that is changing over a couple of recent days is that sunflower prices are going up, but the remaining is pretty much the same. And but these are the prices at the port, delivered to the ports. So what is the breakdown of how we export our commodities these days? So by the sea ports, it is 2.9 million metric tons just within the first 2 weeks of September. And that's very good, because before the grain corridor, we were able to export only 1.2 million metric tons total. Now railroads, 6,000, a little bit over 6,000 tons, and they promised to reach to 1 million as time comes. Maybe their prices for transportation of commodities don't make this way of transportation so interesting for the farmers. Of course, a lot of them use trucks and ferries. That is the Danube River transportation, not much yet. Now, I would like to invite to speak and to present Mr. Mykola Gordichuk. I've known Mykola for all over 10 years. He is one of the leaders in Ukrainian potato production industry. Mykola, are you there?
Yeah, do you hear me?
Yes, yes. Welcome to our biweekly. Thank you for finding time. I understand how busy is the season for you. So please, could you please devote about 15 to 20 minutes of your time to explain how have you been surviving with potato growing in Ukraine over these war months, and what are your projections for growing potatoes, for the market of potatoes in the nearest half a year to a year?
In general, just briefly, I would like to share some information about the sector of potatoes in Ukraine. But first of all, Roman, thank you for inviting me to have a chance to share and to speak to the wider audience and share problems of Ukrainian farmers and challenges that we had due to the Russian aggression over the last 6 months. Overall, 90% of potatoes are grown in Ukraine in the private sector by individual farmers or households. So only 10% of potatoes in Ukraine are grown in professional farms like mine where we grow over 100 hectares of potatoes. In general, Ukraine is one of the largest countries in the world producing potatoes. We are under, I think we are number 5 in the world after United States, India, Russia, and China. Ukraine produces over 20 million tons of potatoes, while professionally Ukraine grows only around 3 million tons of potatoes. And I'm in this business since 2005. I started a farm in 2000. First, I was importing potatoes from Holland and multiplying in Ukraine. Then I started farming in 2010. Now we have 2 small farms, one in Kyiv area and one in Chernihiv area, where we.
By the way, sorry for interruption. How is the Chernihiv location doing? It was one of the regions that was firstly attacked by Russians.
Right. We had no access to our farm until 4th of April. Our village of Andriivka in Chernihiv area was occupied, and we had Russian soldiers in our farm. They have stolen a lot of equipment, mainly instruments, welding machine, video cameras, computers, GPS systems from our John Deeres. But overall, people were safe, and our store, where we had about 1,000 tons of seed potatoes, was also not much damaged. And we had a chance after that, even when we came back of 4th of April, after cleaning our fields from fragments of rockets and mines, we were able even to plant about 97 hectares of potatoes in that area. But in general, Ukrainian farmers have difficulties with selling their potatoes because our biggest market before was Russian Federation. Of course, after we started having troubles with Belarus and Russia, they stopped even transit of our produce through their territories to Azerbaijan, to Georgia, and to other countries. So basically, we could not export at all potatoes, and European Union is closed due to phytosanitary demands. So we have almost zero export from Ukraine except from Moldova. And that's why all these potatoes are dumped on the local market. And in 2015, we visited, with Ukrainian potato growers, visited the United States. And we were surprised that about 90% or even more, 95% of American potatoes are processed in various factories. We visited Washington State, we visited Oregon in that time. In Ukraine, it's vice versa. Only 5% of potatoes are being processed by companies like PepsiCo, by
McDonald's, maybe.
McDonald's is buying 100% of potatoes from McDonald's are being imported. So we don't have even one French fries factory in Ukraine. We only have crisps. So Ukraine, from this point of view, Ukraine could be a very interesting investment opportunity for foreign companies like McCain or Farm Frees or Weston, for example, because we import 100% of our French fries.
After the victory, anyone is welcome.
Yes, after our victory, I think there will be many processing opportunities. But so far, potatoes are being sold on local market, unwashed, mainly unwashed, and that is the biggest problem for farmers, because we cannot demand high price for it. For example, if we compare now prices in Europe, due to drought they had in June and July, prices about 25 cents per kilo. In Ukraine, farmers are selling it now between 12 and 15 cents per kilo of potatoes. Talking about challenges which we had in Ukraine due to the war. First of all, just like you mentioned before, the prices for wheat have been very low, and many farmers were expecting to harvest winter wheat in July and to be able to pay off their loans to the banks. And even in our farm, for example, usually we sell all our wheat. We usually have about 400, 500 metric tons. By this time, we still have it all in our storage, and we don't sell because the price is around 100, 120 US dollars per ton. And of course, it's below self-cost. And so when we cannot sell our wheat, of course, most of the farmers have problems with working capital, because you need now money for planting, for seed drilling again, winter wheat. And you noticed rightly that many farmers, also ourselves, we will decrease this area under winter wheat, because we don't see where we will be able to sell it if the ports are still blocked.
But what is an option for you to have the crop that fits the potato neighboring in them, the crop rotation? There should be some grains.
For crop, yeah, we are considering now buckwheat, for example. You see, it's not only because of the cost. We will plant still about 100 hectares of winter wheat, but also the weather conditions now. It's very, very wet in Ukraine. So many farmers cannot harvest some crops in the fields, but also they cannot seed drill winter wheat. For example, in our area in Chernihiv, over last month, we got over 70 millimeters of rain, which is a lot. And it means that you cannot actually go into the field and prepare the soil and seed drill winter wheat. And if it continues for another week or two, then we will be missing the best terms for planting, and then we will have to be considering other crops which will we have to plant in the spring. So it's also weather conditions are not the best today for harvesting potatoes, but also for we usually plant winter wheat after potatoes on our potato soils. So as I mentioned, low prices for winter wheat have contributed to deficit in working capital. Also, high cost of input supplies for fertilizers, for example, the prices almost tripled for some fertilizers, for potassium, for NPK, and for ammonium sulfate. So many farmers will either use less of fertilizers, or they will try to use crops which do not require so much fertilization. We have increase in cost of diesel. We have increase in cost of crop protection chemicals. For example, we are using Diquat, which is a Reglon. It's a product of Syngenta, which we use for desiccation of some crops like sunflowers or also potatoes. Last year we paid about $7 per liter. This year's price was $14 per liter. So price not only in hryvnia, in local currency increased, but also price in dollars has increased, and it makes a big impact on for Ukrainian farmers. Some farmers will stop growing some crops. Also, some farmers will stop with potatoes, because potato is very much say fertilizer intensive crop, and then of course it will next year farmers will reconsider their crops. We can move to the next slide, I think. So basically, in our farm, we still are harvesting potatoes. We have about total we have planted this season 150 hectares. We still have about 80 hectares to go to harvest, but because of wet conditions, we cannot harvest now. We supply potatoes to seed potatoes. We supply to other farmers in different regions of Ukraine, and we supply also to supermarkets of Kyiv and the area. We are cooperating with Metro Cash and Carry, which is a German retailer, and we also have a brand Papas, which we developed with the support of USAID 2 years ago to help farmers to promote their potatoes in the supermarkets. And of course, during the Russian aggression and when the war started in February, on 21st of February, I took my family out of Kyiv. We drove to Chernivtsi, Western Ukraine, where my family stayed. And then right after when the first possibility was there, I got back on 20th of March and got to my farm. The highway was completely destroyed, so we had to go, instead of regular 30 minutes, 40 minutes. We had to drive 6 hours around to get to the farm. And we started loading potatoes to farmers because we believed that Russians will not get back after they were kicked out from Kiev region and later on from Chernihiv. So then we started giving away some seed potatoes to households which suffered from Russian aggression, and we were supported later on by USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development.
Mhm.
And together, you can move to the next slide. And together we have reached over 6,000 households who benefited from our seed potatoes. We gave away 650 tons of seed potatoes for free to these households in various villages of Ukraine, because nobody knew what will happen after in a week or two, in a month. So we wanted to make sure that people have seed potatoes so they can grow their own crops in the gardens, and they can help themselves, but also those temporary moved people from the east, from Kharkiv region, from part of Zaporizhia, Severodonetsk, who came to Kiev Oblast, also to Ternopil, Lviv, and Volyn areas. So that's been mainly our activities since the war started. We did some work in the farm, but also we did a lot of volunteer work and also helping some households and individual farmers with seed potatoes and to grow crops. So it's I have to admit that life has changed a lot to me and for me and my family since February 24th.
Are they back to Kiev now?
My oldest daughters, I have two daughters which are older, and they are back to Kiev. And my small daughter, she is 10, she is still with my wife in France, and she started school there. But we hope that after the war is over, they will all return back home.
That is what I'm wishing. I wish to you and everyone who is outside. By the way, we are in Germany right now, and tomorrow we are going back to Kiev, first to Western Ukraine and then to Kiev with my family. There were 5 families with me here, and slowly, one by one, we were returning, and tomorrow is our turn. So I perfectly understand what you are talking about and how it changed. However, I feel like we are not prepared to see what people who have lived through all this war in Ukraine, they are used to those things which we are not prepared to. And that's very nice that you have been supporting these small households in the villages. That's actually, I didn't know that myself, but it fits perfectly our mission, World to Rebuild Rural Ukraine, whereas we are focusing the family farms in their attempt to rebuild after the damages to Russian damages by Russian army, and to continue producing these numbers of horticulture and animal produce that they have been doing before the war.
Right. Well, again, thank you for giving me a possibility to share our story, and I also thank you to those people who are supporting Ukraine and also standing with Ukraine during these difficult times.
Thank you. All the best to you and to us. Have a peaceful sky and unoccupied land to be able to farm it. And we are continuing. There is another 5 minutes left for us to present. I would like to share with you our developments within the 3 host farms, or actually households, that we are trying to help. And just to remind you, these are the numbers that, by the way, Mykola mentioned: 90% of potatoes, 40% of small grains, 60% of dairy produce. These are the numbers produced by the small family farms or household in the villages in Ukraine. And our aim is to help them. So first is Alla Kokosha. She lives in the Buzova village. She was the first we started to work with on helping her rebuild. And you can see the process has started. These are the recent photos. The wrecks of her summer house is being demolished, and instead we will be building the first house for them to spend this winter in. Also, the second aid recipient was Alexander, the farmer who farms 500 hectares in Alexander Kivashaya in the north from Kiev area, and the Russians made his facilities their repair station for military, and they were shelling Ukrainian forces from those locations. Of course, their answer, so to say, the counter offensive attacks were coming to their locations, and as a result, the farm was destroyed. So we helped, we spread the word about his story, and we found a tractor for him, presented by the CEO of Maize, and the tractor is already working, preparing the fields for planting the winter crops. Also, the journalists from various media resources in Ukraine joined their efforts in helping raise some money for him to rebuild his storage facility, because this is the priority, to have the place where to store the crops that he is harvesting. So this is another success story. And the third one is Irina Shevchenko. She is the smallest, so to say, farmer. She has 8 cows right now, which she needs to put into some kind of shed for the winter time. Our aim is to rebuild the shed for her. We have this is the budget that we have agreed with our board of ambassadors for this rebuilding, and recently our farmers shared some equipment. So there were windows to rebuild that were donated by the farmers, milking equipment, and the refrigerators to keep the milk cool for her to be able to proceed farming dairy farms. And that is just the beginning. Like I said, new areas are being revealed and damages to those areas. So our work will be continuing for years after that, but without your support, we have no chance for success. So please, we are asking you to share the information about our initiative, to invite as many people as you can to listen to our bi-weeklies every second Friday, every 14 days. We are reporting on what we have done and what's going on in Ukraine. And a lot of news are coming in between to our Facebook page and our website, of course. This is the first time I'm saying that, but please don't forget to like the video of this YouTube, because it will bring us to the top in YouTube, and this is how we are going to reach more audience. Meanwhile, thank you very much. Have a peaceful, calm, and enjoying weekend. And we will proceed doing what we are doing right now. And me and my family, we are going back to Ukraine. Thank you, Slava Ukraini, and Slava to Ukrainian allies who are supporting us in these hard times.